The sun is up, the day is wide open, and life still has so much to give. Every laugh, every step, every shared moment says the story is still unfolding beautifully. You are not finished yet. Your story continues.
Most people think life follows a straight line. Education, career, retirement. But for many, that line changes. Sometimes by choice, sometimes by circumstance, and sometimes by a moment they never expected. This is Not Finished Yet, a podcast about people who started again and discovered their most interesting chapter was still ahead. Each episode shares real stories of reinvention, the risks, the decisions, and what it actually takes to build something new later in life. Because the truth is, you're not starting from scratch, you're starting from experience. Can I just add that the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily reflect those of any organisations, employers, or partners connected to them. Before we start, a quick note. A large number of people who listen to the podcast haven't yet subscribed. If you find these conversations valuable, hit subscribe or follow on your platform. It makes a huge difference and helps us keep sharing these stories. Now, let's get into this week's story.
Here we go. So here we are. I'm in sunny England at the moment. Travelled a bit myself, and you're in Washington. So welcome, Tracy. Whatever we don't want to talk about, we'll cut out. So don't worry about anything. We'll just have a casual chat and just get comfortable. And what time zone is it where you are at the moment?
I'm in Eastern Standard Time, or Eastern Daylight. I guess it's daylight time, so it's 10:30.
Okay, yeah.
I had a panic attack because I've been staying up late for the past couple days, and I've been really busy at work. And I woke up at 9:38 or something, or 9:48. No, it must have been 9:42. And I opened my email as I always do, and it said, "You have something in 18 minutes." And I was like, "Oh shoot!" I totally. Because I was up really, really late last night doing some work, and so I'm glad I woke up.
Well, it's about 3:30. I haven't been. I was recently in the States. I was there in January, and I was caught in that lovely snowstorm.
Oh yeah.
And I spent a lot of time in New York over the years, and I must admit that one period in late January was the coldest I can remember it being for many years. I know it's been cold over there over the years, but that part really got hit, didn't it? Your that eastern part of the
Yeah,
States.
DC never gets that cold. I've only lived out here for a year, but I'm from Buffalo and I know cold, and I've lived in Chicago. Um, DC never gets like that. And it was very, very, the snow didn't melt for, it got so cold, the snow was like ice, like Iceland. And it was here for quite a while afterwards, which is it's just very unusual.
Excellent. Well, look, let's get straight in.
All right.
Hopefully, won't keep you too long. So let me just start by saying to everyone, welcome back this week. We have a lady, Tracy Smith, who's a solo traveller, a storyteller, whose debut book, The Purpose of Getting Lost, chronicles her journey from decades of pretending and people-pleasing to rediscovering herself across continents. So this is something that rings true when we first started this podcast about the amazing people around the world that can just get up and change their life and get on with it. At 49, after divorce, surgeries and a lifetime of feeling like she didn't quite fit in, Tracy booked a one-way ticket to Iceland and kept going. Now in Washington, by the sounds of it, and moving on to Africa, which we'll find out about in a minute. Today, she uses her global adventures to explore belonging, courage, midlife reinvention, and what it really means to choose yourself. Her work resonates deeply with women navigating transition, reminding us that it's never too late to rewrite your story. So please welcome again, Tracy. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me, Mark. I'm really excited to be here talking with you today.
Excellent. So Tracy, for those hearing your story for the first time, tell me who Tracy Smith is and what led you to write The Purpose of Getting Lost.
Well, I wrote it because I had gone to, over the course of about 2.5 years, I had gone to near 30 countries, and I had a lot of really great stories, a lot of really funny stories. And so one day my niece was telling me, you should do a TikTok. That's what she really told me. She said, you should do a TikTok and tell your stories. And I sat down trying to do TikTok, but as an old woman, I just couldn't figure out how to do it. Like I didn't love the way I was looking on camera. I couldn't figure out. I didn't have the energy for like revising and editing videos or whatever. So I quickly gave up on TikTok, but then at that point I was already thinking the story needed to be told, these stories, and I sat down to write it. Needless to say, the book isn't just the funny stories because there's a lot more to it. But what ended up happening was, as I was working with an editor, a developmental editor at the beginning, he started asking me, like, what's the message and what are you trying to write about? And it really had me sitting thinking, well, what did I get out of all these travels? Was I just somebody who was just going to a bunch of countries? And I knew that wasn't true because this I had been going to more and more countries faster and faster. By the time I wrote the book, I had quit my job, had quit like had decided to quit this one job. And so I knew there was more than just funny stories. But the original impetus was I had a lot of funny stories and I wanted to tell them. I still think they're really funny. But
So before we get onto that one way ticket, as you mentioned it before, before you booked that flight, what did life look like then?
life was taking care of everybody. Uh, at the time, we had a seven, no, maybe a 6-year-old mini golden doodle that's like having a toddler around the house. We had a couple cats. I had 3 kids, all in various stages of schooling. I remember there was one year I was driving kids to 3 different schools because one was in grade school, one was a freshman at high school, and the other was a senior in high school, but they all went to different schools. So driving, trying to get all over the place. I hadn't dated in quite a while because I just wasn't feeling like I had the time and the energy to really give to dating and trying to meet somebody. Um, it was working full time. I had finished a dissertation and got my PhD, and so I was doing that. So I think it was a life that was built around everybody else, grocery shopping and laundry, and never really thinking about what do I want.
Hmm.
Even like my job, like even with the job I had, I was taking so that I could make more money, so I could pay more tuition, so I could make sure my kids had clothes, so that we could afford this expensive Coco Chanel kind of dog. Like, I mean, it was everything, but there was never a decision for me as to what I wanted.
Yeah. So on that, you talked about never truly feeling like you belonged. How long had that feeling been there?
That had been for that had been since I was a child. Like I remember like in middle school, I went to the same school from like 6th grade to 12th grade. And I remember while I was in school, like um always just existing on the periphery of those friendships. So maybe we were friends, but they were never really the friend that you say, let me call that person up this weekend and see what they're doing. It was never They were never this feeling that I belonged to a group. I belonged to a person, the way that a lot of people talk about their friendships. And then after high school, there was college, and then I kind of moved around a lot. I went to California, I went to Colorado, I went to Chicago. I was kind of like all over the place. And again, I never really had that. And then getting into marriage, my ex-husband's family certainly didn't accept me. I was an outsider. They were Southsiders and I was definitely an outsider. And so I think it's been like for me lifelong, never really existing within a group, always just being on the outside of the
Yeah.
group.
So looking back, what signs were telling you that something needed to change then within that life of yours?
I was starting to feel more and more um I didn't want to go to work. And I know that's a lot of people, right? Where they're like, I don't want to go to work. I don't love this job. And, that's the culture we live in. We have to go to work. We have to do these jobs. But I think for me, um, it like once I had started traveling is when I decided to make the life change. The trip to Iceland, really was not intended as a life change. It was really the reminder of this dream that I had had back in my 20s that all of a sudden I saw an opportunity to say yes to. But I didn't realize until after I had really started going to these countries that I needed to make a change because this is the life I wanted and not the life that I was living.
So let's dig into that. You've talking about motherhood, divorced. How did divorce and motherhood transition and career burnout affect your kind of identity? How do you think that?
I think that, like, it's really hard when it's really hard when you feel like you don't belong to somebody, right? Or you don't have a partner. And then when you get divorced, but you have kids, and then you're left on the outside of that group even more. Like I was always on the outside, but after the divorce, they they would send invitations to my kids and they would be well, they would send invitations to the house. The kids live with me full time, and there would be like a baby shower or a birthday party or a graduation or whatever it is, and they would address the invitations to my kids. My kids would be like 10 and 12 years old at the time, or however old. I mean, they weren't driving age. And so I would think to myself, like, how do you expect them to get there? Like, you want me to bring them to your house, drop them off, and then leave, where you can just really tell me furthermore that you don't accept me and that I don't belong to your little group. And so, when it was really challenging for me because when my ex-husband, he was in the service, and so he would, when he wanted to see the kids, the only identity I had at this point, because I no longer was a wife, was mother, right? That was my primary. And because with motherhood, I belonged, right? Like they're my kids. Like they're not going to, well, I know this isn't true of all parent child relationships, but for mine, I belonged with my kids, right? Like that
Yeah.
was that was my core, and they knew that and I knew that. And so whenever they left to go to their dads, there was a worry that always existed in me that I wouldn't belong anymore, right? Like that the last place where I really truly belonged would be taken away from me. And I think that really fed into the travel some, this independence of being like, I can't put my whole identity into being a mother, because eventually they're going to get to a point where, you know, they are doing their own thing and I still belong to them, but we can't, they're not, I'm not going to be their whole world. When they were younger, I was their whole world and it was different.
Yeah, so I asked some of these questions because it resonates with some people that are listening, going through similar or have been. Did you realise you were unhappy, or had that simply just become your normal?
Um, so there were two different times right after I got divorced. I didn't realize how unhappy I had been until actually we were at a cheer competition for my daughter, and I was wearing a pair of jeans, and one of the other moms said to me, she was like, "Oh my God, Tracy, those jeans are ginormous on you," or I don't remember what she said. And then she pulled at the back of the jeans, and there were several inches of open whatever. And so I realized then that I had not been really taking very good care of myself in terms of eating, because I had lost a lot of weight. And to me, that was really a sign of how unhappy I had been. But then
Yeah.
what ended up happening later was then I kind of settled back into a routine after being divorced and doing whatever, that when I started traveling, that's when I realized I was unhappy with my job, right? So like the first one was realizing I was unhappy with the marriage. The second one was really about the job and being like, oh man, like this isn't working for me anymore. And what do I do about it? And that really has been a very difficult transition that I'm just now making decisions about, is right now.
So what was your breaking point then?
Um I think at
Was
the
there a
job,
specific breaking point?
yeah, so like, the one that caused me to move to Washington D.C., I had been working in Chicago, and I had been at the specific position I was in for about 3 years. But at about a year and a half, I had injured my shoulder. I'd had a bunch of surgeries. One of my coworkers, like she screamed at me, and it was really horrible. Um, and I think at that point I realized we were having a very specific argument, and I think at that point I realized that I the job is not going to be loyal to me, right? Like I need to be loyal to myself, and I need to stick up for myself. So I think I started right then and there, I started breaking away from the position. That was in 2020, that was in March of 2024. By December of 2024, I had made a conscious decision that I needed to take some time off from the position, which I did. And then by February of 2025, I had left because I just knew that it wasn't, I just couldn't work that job. I took another similar job thinking that maybe it was the job itself. But over the past year, I've come to realize it's not the job. It's the work. I want to be doing something different. And so now I'm making that big change where at the end of this year, I'm I'm leaving the kind of work that I do right now, which is financial administration. And, I've been doing it for 20 years, and I'm leaving that so that I can go write and do research and do a writing project the way I want to.
Okay, so let's get on to the one of the statements I think you made was about that one-way ticket that maybe wasn't a permanent one-way ticket, but it's an interesting thing. So I'll try and wrap up a few questions, a few bits into this. It's really like the decision that changed everything. Tell us about the exact moment you booked the ticket, why you chose Iceland, what fears really stopped you, nearly stopped you.
Yeah, and it's actually kind of a funny story. The way it kind of grows is because I was out with some girlfriends, and at the time my youngest son was 15, so he wasn't quite driving yet. The other two, my daughter was graduating from high school that year and going off to college. My older son was already in college. And in the winter time of 2022, I was out with some girlfriends, and one of them was like, we're going to Ireland. And I was like, I want to go. Like, I mean, like out of nowhere, I was like, I want to go. And so we were sitting in the bar, and probably within 5 minutes, they had shared with me their flight to Ireland. So this was to Ireland. They shared me with their flight, and I purchased a round trip ticket, and I was going to Ireland. We were going to figure out the tour. So I was super excited about that. Well, that summer, remember I said, kind of leading up to this trip, I hadn't been dating. Well, that summer I decided to start dating again. And one of the people that I had met, he was a pilot, and we would have these great conversations about all these places he went. And all of a sudden, it was like this dream that I had had when I was back in my 20s was remembered. Like it was almost like I had forgotten that I had this dream to see the world. And so, um, and this is why it's so funny, because we were on this conversation one day, and he's like, well, I really want to go to Norway. Now, mind you, I have a round trip ticket to Ireland. And he says, well, I really want to go to Norway. And we're talking about this round trip ticket to Ireland. And I was like, oh, I want to go to Norway. Like, that would be really cool. What if I go to Norway before I go to Ireland? And I'll meet my friends in Ireland. So I hurry up, and as I typically don't spend a lot of time thinking these things through, but I changed that ticket that I have, and rather than going round trip to Ireland, I decide I'm going to go round trip to Copenhagen, and then I'm going to continue on to Norway, and then I'll go over to Ireland. I'll meet my friends, and it's all wonderful and great. Well, maybe 10 days. I don't really remember the exact timeline, but it wasn't very much. I was on Facebook, and Facebook, they hear it, read your thoughts and everything. And
Yeah.
on my Facebook feed was a Iceland stopovers. And I was like, Iceland? well, I don't know. I want to go to Iceland. So I'm supposed to go to Ireland. I changed it to go to Copenhagen and to go to Denmark and Norway. And then I decide I'm going to go to Iceland at the start of my trip. And this was has me leaving in just a few days. Like I'm at the point where I'm ready to go. And so I booked the ticket to Iceland, but because I couldn't change that other ticket, I ended up buying just this one-way ticket to Iceland so that I could go there. And then I go from Iceland over to Copenhagen, and then I continue on my trip. Trying to get home, I ended up having two tickets to get home because I thought that they canceled my flight from Ireland home. And I remember sitting on the airplane coming home from Ireland, and the American Airlines flight attendant comes up to me and she's like, "Are you Tracy Sikorsky?" That's my married name, the name I fly under. And I said, "Yes, I am." She's like, "I have you double booked on this flight." And it was because I still had the initial itinerary of going through Denmark and Ireland, and I also had to purchase a one-way ticket because I didn't think that that other one was still good because I didn't take the outbound flight. I ended up going on a Iceland air flight to Iceland and then went over. So it was a one-way ticket, but it was really part of this bigger experience that I ended up doing. And it was really all because of this pilot who he just started talking. He lived in Abu Dhabi and he just started talking about all these great places he had been. And I was like, oh my God, I want to go to all these great places.
So, what was the moment when you realised this trip was well, much more than just travel?
I didn't. I mean, it was actually 2 years later. It really took me quite a long time. So in the 2 years to go from where we were, that was in September of 2022. And until I had not really realized that it was becoming more than travel. And actually, I'll say it was like a year and a half, and then 9 months later, in January of 2024, I went to Southeast Asia and I went for 3 weeks. That was the first moment where I started to think about I want to do this more. And I could tell because the number of trips I was planning, the frequency, the duration, the intensity, where I was going was growing. All of it was growing, and soon I knew it was going to reach kind of like the edges of the bubble, and that was going to pop. I didn't know when, because like the trip before the one to Southeast Asia in January 2024, that had been to it had been a few months and I had just gone to London for a Bills game, right? I wasn't really going that much. After the trip in January 2024, I went to Greece in March. I went to Belize in June. I went to Peru in July. And by September of 2024, I went for 4 weeks back to Southeast Asia. And that's when I really knew that this is not just travel. Like this for me is like um I forget what they call that, like when it was like my blood, I could feel my blood coursing through my veins literally by the time I was doing this travel. Like it just became I had to do it. It was a feeling of I have to do it, not I want to do it. And so that's when I started making active attempts at traveling, at going, it moving, it being, yeah, it being gone.
Did you think that freedom arrived immediately, or was it a bit more fear came first?
Freedom, no, well, I was definitely terrified when I got on the flight to Iceland, and then I kind of was like, okay, I'm good. This can be good. And then when I got into Iceland and I had no money and I didn't have my phone because I didn't know it would work, and I didn't really prepare for it in the way I thought. I mean, I really thought it was going to be like traveling in the US, which I had done with my kids a lot. But so I really thought I was gonna get on off the airplane and just be able to go. I didn't really plan very well. I'm not really sure what I was thinking. Um, but I will say that once I figured it out, and definitely by the time I got to Copenhagen, there's no doubt that by the time I got to Copenhagen, the freedom just hit me. I was like, oh my God, like I'm here. I'm doing this. I'm like, and so that for me was really the freedom came very, very, very quickly, that
So,
I could just move. I could just do whatever I wanted to do.
so it's quite interesting that how you've described that. So, you know, you've called it, you know, getting lost on purpose. You know, let's go into what the idea behind the book was. What does getting lost on purpose actually mean?
Well, for me, it meant that before, from all those years, like it had this double meaning, right? Because for me, like I felt like I was living life lost. Like I felt like my entire life up until I was traveling, really what I was lost. I would constantly say, I was working at this health center, which was part of the university, and I would be like, I don't really know what I do. My kids would say, "What kind of job do you do, Mom?" And I'd be like, I don't really know. I mean, I knew what my title was, but I couldn't explain it to anybody. People would ask me like, what are the things that I enjoy doing? And I'd be like, I don't really know. Like, I don't, so I felt like I moved through life very much being lost. And so when I started traveling, that definitely for me was like these aha moments that maybe I'm not so lost anymore. But then the double meaning of it is whenever I travel, I'm always lost. I have a terrible sense of navigation or direction or whatever. But sometimes those moments when I'm lost have become some of the best moments where I have realized something about myself. Like sitting in this plaza, I was in Barcelona in 2023, and I was lost trying to find this church. I wanted to find this cathedral, couldn't find it anywhere. I was walking in circles. Finally, I decided just to sit down at this little outdoor cafe and have some lunch, and I think I had a beer and some like appetizers, and I was still, and I felt good about it, right? Like I normally don't feel good when I'm still like that. I normally get really anxious. And it was kind of like this. So being lost in that plaza in Barcelona for me made me become still. And so that was the whole purpose of being lost, to feel that stillness and to say, it's okay to be still sometimes. Or in Iceland, when I was lost trying to find the bus shuttle, I was trying to find the buses into Reykjavik and I couldn't, and I was walking in circles. I think I needed to feel that fear in order to also feel the confidence that was going to come afterwards when I made it all work. So I think this purpose of being lost just had this double meaning of my life. If I hadn't been lost my whole life, I don't know if I would have embraced travel and moving the way I did. But also, when I get lost when I'm out on these trips, it's a way for me to dig deep and find something about myself that maybe I didn't know.
Yeah, so you know, becomes like a vehicle, doesn't it, for self discovery? But
Yes.
let's get into some personal stuff then. What uncomfortable truths did you discover about yourself when you were sitting there, maybe in that square?
Yeah, I think the one of the ones that I keep coming to is that maybe the belonging and being always existing on the outside of these groups is partially my own doing, right? Like I think that that's probably the one that is the hardest for me to reconcile, because this came up recently. I went on a trip to Vietnam for my friend's wedding, and I could feel myself while we were on that trip. I went with a friend to my friend's wedding, and I could feel myself, I don't want to say picking fights, but almost like picking fights with my friend who traveled with me. And I think I kind of realized back in Barcelona, back in Iceland, that sometimes I might be the reason I don't belong in these groups, right? Like it's me. It's not the people. Or like when somebody calls me up last weekend, somebody called me up and said, "Hey, do you want to hang out?" And I was able to find an excuse not to hang out. And
Yeah,
again, I think
yeah,
that's just me.
I get that because, like I say, it's people with busy minds. Yeah, same with me. So when you look at my life, and you'd ask people that know me, they'd say he's the life and soul of the party. If you saw my other podcast, It's a very boisterous type of boy construction related podcast, and that's it. But I purposely, you'd say that therefore I'm involved in everything, but I purposely sit on the edge. And I dip in when I want to, and I think that's because of a busy mind. When you've got that kind of a mind that you're reflecting, you're obviously writing as well, so it brings something out. I found writing my first ever chapters, if you like, for poetry, and then I used to, when I was younger, that was me getting it out. I actually do software development now because it gets it out of my brain, and I put it down on something. It's similar to written a book, and then maybe you're the same as that, because that resonates with me, because I can see that it does become, I think, looking back, I felt sometimes as an outsider. I didn't have a close male bonded friend that I can. But now I look back, and in actual fact, now I look, and I've written a book that's coming out in a couple of months about my friends group and our soccer team that we grew up with, just for us really. And it made me realise that, do you know what? I've actually got more friends than I think that I have, but they might not be close, as in I have to be in their pocket. But when I phone them, they're available, or when I want to dip in, I'll go. So, on a long-winded way of saying it, I kind of really get where you're going. But were there moments then when you wanted to abandon the journey? Did you feel that there was any time that you thought, oh, I'm overthinking this, or?
Always overthink it. But that happens more when I'm sitting back home in the US, and something happens, or there's an email at work, or a text message from a friend, or my children, or my ex-husband. Those are always overthink. But the minute I'm gone, it's like the minute I get on the airplane, there is no overthinking at all. And at this point, I now have gone to 38 countries. Since writing the book, I've added on more than 50,000 air miles. And so I don't get to go as much as I want, because I have a full-time job and I have to be here, but which is why I'm making this kind of change with my life, because I do realize that when I'm out and gone, that I like I sleep better. I actually just wrote this essay recently about, or I don't know if it's an essay or a note on Substack or something, where I even said that. I was like, I'm in Vietnam and I'm sleeping through the night. Here in DC, when I was in Chicago, there are no sleeping through the night, or there's waking up there's not falling asleep until 2 a.m. because I've got stuff going on in my head that I have to think about and write about, and I just don't feel that same kind of pressure. I also want to say, kind of to your comment, because somebody has said this, they actually, there was a person who, one of the reviews on the book, I think it was, she said, oh, for somebody who feels like they don't belong, she makes friends awfully easily, or something like that. I don't know. There was this comment, and it makes me think, kind of like you're saying, when you sit back and reflect, there are a lot of friendships, right? Like, I have some really close friends, both at home, and I have some that, like my friend in Vietnam who invited me to her wedding, and we chat, every month or something like that. But there are pockets that are each kind of like isolated. So then it sometimes feels like I don't I don't have that friend group, or I'm existing on the periphery, because each of those friends have their groups, right?
Yeah, and I get that bit where you're, if it's anything like me, is that yes, you're okay to make a friendship and put up a conversation to someone. It doesn't mean that you're actually letting them right in. You're probably keeping them at that barrier for until you're ready to invite them in. But I'm interested in this side of it, really. So let's ask, how different is the Tracy sitting here today compared to the Tracy who boarded that first flight then?
Oh my God, night and day. I still don't really do any preparation for trips when I go. So, I just kind of um book a flight to go somewhere, and I'll find out if I need a visa, and that's kind of it. Maybe I book a couple of, like, private I'd like to book private tours because it allows me to have one-on-one conversations with a guide who actually functions more as a translator and then takes me to the places I want to go. So that part's still the same. That hasn't changed. But this Tracy versus that Tracy isn't the one who thinks that maybe I now know that like things are going to go wrong. Like when I was in Senegal in November, my luggage got left behind in Paris, and I never went to Paris. My luggage went to Paris. But the thing is like there was no panic from me at the airport when I realized that my luggage wasn't coming. It was more kind of like, okay, my luggage isn't here. Maybe I'm going to need to go out and buy some clothes. Let's go buy some toiletries. Let's go get what I needed. I think the Tracy who traveled for the first time in 2022, she might have panicked or wanted to find wanted to have an immediate solution. This Tracy isn't looking for the immediate solution. It's more like, I'm going to figure it out. It'll be fine. So it's
So,
definitely a change there.
so do you think someone can experience this kind of like transformation without traveling?
Yeah, absolutely, I do. I think that the very first thing that a person who wants to make this kind of, and I don't really think of this as reinvention. As a side note, I really have come to realize that I think this is just a person needs to recognize that they exist. And so when we start thinking about what that takes, it means saying yes to the person and not just yes to all of the identities, right? And one of the best examples I can give you is at Christmas time. I rented an Airbnb in Chicago with my children for the holiday. I was in DC, they're in Chicago, and so I wanted to spend time with them. And I realized that I exist as a person. I exist as Tracy. Sure, I'm mom and I'm daughter and I'm sister and I'm colleague and I'm all these people, but I'm also Tracy. And it really took me a while to come up with that thinking through because there was this discussion I had with my kids at Christmas time, and it made me realize they're not just my children. They also are people, right? They also have this own identity as the person that they are. And so I think anybody can take control of that identity, that person that they are, and say, I'm worth taking up space beyond the identity of being mom, father, sister, brother, whatever all the other roles that we play in our life. And when you learn to say yes to that person, you'll find that you're kind of embracing who you are, and others will start to see you as that person too. And they won't just see you as mom, right? They're going to start seeing you as, say, in my case, Tracy, who has dreams and goals and things that she wants to do in life that might not necessarily revolve around them. And I think it's really hard, but you can start with small things. Had a friend and I said, the dishes will always be in the sink. Maybe the way you can start is simply by saying, I'm going to read a chapter of a book tonight. That's what I'm going to do. I'll go do the dishes later. And to me, that's saying yes to yourself, allowing those dishes to sit in the sink for a few hours. They're not going to go anywhere, of not mopping the floor right away. We do all these things because we feel like we have to as part of our identities and part of these roles that we have.
Yeah, so it's not a case of getting lost is about the geography. It's more about the mindset than really. That's what
Yeah,
you're
it's
that's
just
what you're saying.
recognizing that you have things that you want to do too outside of all these other things that we have to do. And saying yes to them sometimes. Just literally saying yes to reading the book. We feel a lot of guilt, I think, when we sit down and read books or go for a walk or instead of playing with the child or doing dishes or cleaning the floor, taking out the dog. I just think we feel a lot of guilt about that, and we shouldn't.
Yeah, and I get that, and I think a lot of us listening, and especially myself and experience that, you do feel that bit of guilt, and you should take the time out. It's a good advice. Now, on that, in the book, you speak about, I think one of the most powerful themes that I could find was really about belonging and versus like fitting. So you write about the difference between fitting in and belonging. What do you think the difference is that is?
Yeah, I think like fitting in is me trying to perform for a group, right? Like I'm performing internally to make myself fit in with the people that I'm surrounded by. Maybe this group I'm being louder or more boisterous or more talkative or more fun. Maybe with this group I'm being shyer or quieter. I see this a lot in my romantic relationships actually, where I try to mold myself to the guy that I'm dating. Does he want an intellectual? I can be an intellectual. I got a PhD, so I'm an intellectual. I'm dating this guy. Oh, he likes country music and he wants somebody who's just a lot of friend or a lot of fun and hanging out. Okay, I can be that person too. You want to watch sports all night? Great, I can be that person too. And so for me, I think that's fitting in, right? You're just trying to blend in with the people that you're surrounded by yourself with. And to me, that's a performance. When you belong, you don't have to perform anymore. You get to be kind of the raw person that exists inside of you, the one that might come with all the baggage or that comes with the fear and the trauma, who sometimes can be happy, but sometimes they can be sad. And the reason why I know that I wasn't really belonging is I had two groups of friendships at different points after my divorce. And I really thought with both of those groups, like I belonged. I really thought I was a part of those groups. They called me when we were going out. I was part, we had these text group messages, right? Like I was invited places, we went places. And I really thought I was a part of that. I belonged to it. But at the end of the day, when I couldn't always be the fun person that they thought that I was no longer a part of that group. And that tells me, when I look back at it, it tells me I didn't really belong to that group. I was just performing to fit into that group. And,
So,
you know,
yeah, go on, sorry. I was going to carry on with that. I was just going to say, was there, let's talk about when did you stop looking for permission from others? Was there a particular encounter during your travels, for example, that changed your understanding of that kind of belonging?
I don't know if there was a particular moment, but I think when I had been dating this guy for about after the first trip, when I came back from Iceland, that trip, I started dating somebody and we dated for about a year. And so my 50th birthday happened in August of 23. I came back from that trip, and then by September of 23, just before I hit the year mark with the guy that I had been dating, um, I realized that was the moment when I started to realize I didn't need somebody else to make me happy. I didn't need to belong to these groups or try to fit in or try to perform anymore. Like I was finally figuring out how I could, like, I was finally figuring out that I was okay as a person, right? Like as existing as a person. And so then, and I didn't really realize that in September of 23. I just knew I ended the relationship because something was off. And at the time I thought I was ending it because we didn't have the same, I wanted more. That's what I thought. And then that's when that Southeast Asia trip came along 4 months later. And like I said, that was that first kind of trip where I started to realize I was like, no, I don't need anybody to make me happy. I'm making myself happy. I'm roaming the streets of Koh Samui and watching a Buffalo Bills playoff game with a beer at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I don't need anybody to put a smile on my face because I'm putting the smile on my face myself. Or there were like all these other things that happened on that trip, like just going through Vietnam and um or going when I went to Chiang Mai, Thailand for New Year's Eve, right? Like, so that trip was really probably, if I had to describe any moment or trip, that was the one where it finally started to be like, okay, I'm changing. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but I knew something was happening. And then again, 9 months later is when I really, 9 months later is when I really was able to figure out something happened. There was a specific moment I had texted somebody, which was really unlike me. And when I texted her and him. There were two different people I texted, and I normally don't do this. I normally don't invite myself places where I'm not invited. I never do that. And I'm rarely the person who reaches out to people and say, "Hey, do you want to hang out tonight?" Um, and I did that in Vietnam, and that was my really first clue that I'm a different person. Like I had reached out to these two people randomly and said, "Hey, I'm here in Da Nang. Do you guys want to hang out while I'm here?" And in both situations, I hung out with both of the people I texted, and I was like, "Okay, you can do this, Tracy. This is who you really are."
And this is the bit that's kind of intrigued me a little bit, because you've talked about trying to fit in. You've explained that quite well. That you if your then partner wanted you to be into country and western, you'd have been into country and western. You've talked about that. So what links this together really nicely is, what do you think, or why do you think strangers sometimes understand us better than the people we've known for years then?
Well, because you get to craft your own story, right? So when I'm traveling, I'm anonymous. I'm just Tracy, right? I'm not mom and sister and colleague and all these other identities. And so when I travel, I'm sitting whether it's a bar or having dinner by myself. Like in Barcelona, I went and had dinner by myself, and I felt okay with it. I was just Tracy. And if somebody asked me, I get to be the story that I want to be. And it's not that I'm trying to fit into who they are. It's just me, whoever I am. And that really um is one of the reasons why I like to travel alone, because I kind of for me it brings out the true person that might be sitting in underneath. Because I tell people a lot, I'm like, I'm shy. That's what I tell people. I'm like, I'm really shy. I can't talk to people in social settings. I'm socially awkward. I'm like, whatever. But yet when I travel, somehow that goes away. And that makes me believe that underneath, I'm probably not as shy as I really believe that I am. And somehow getting on the road, I'm able to allow that to kind of bubble up, and the real person that I am comes out. And
Yeah.
I just think it's, where nobody knows who we are. So it's this beauty of not being afraid that whoever you are is not good enough for the people around you, that you have to perform for them, right? Like when I'm home, I have to perform for those people. I don't
Yeah.
have
So,
to do that when I travel.
but not everyone's as brave as you. Yeah. Not everyone will just get up and do what you do. So for those that are listening and don't, what did those unexpected, let's call them unexpected connections, teach you about humanity, really?
Yeah, I think we need to be really kind to people, and we need to give people grace as they figure that out, right? Because we don't I mean, I know this is so cliche, but we don't know what anybody is going through. And so from my perspective, I'm just going to give everybody grace and encourage them along on whatever journey it is that they're going on. I have a coworker, and she recently went to China. She actually just got back a few days ago, and when I met her, we started talking about my travels and the things that I did. And at the end of early on, she's like, "I really want to go to China. I want to go back and I want to see my family. I haven't been in a long time," but she was kind of afraid to go. And then I don't know, a few months ago, she came up to me and she's like, "Tracy, I'm going to China. I booked my ticket. I'm going to China." And I was like, "Oh my God, I'm so excited for you," because all I did in those 6 to 8 months leading up to her booking her ticket to China, I just encouraged her to do whatever it felt like she needed to do, right? Like I didn't judge when she said I'm too afraid, or my kids, or this or that. I didn't judge any of that. I just simply said, "You can do this. If you can do this, and it'll be hard, but you'll be able to do this. And maybe now's not the right time. Maybe it'll be a year from now, and you'll know when it's the right time." So I think we just need to give people grace and kindness and empathy, like listen to them, and just stop judging them. We judge so many people, and I don't, I try not to live my life like that.
Well, look, I mean, most of this theme behind the podcast is reinvention in midlife, and that's what we talk to people about, So, what would you say to someone listening in their 40s, 50s, or 60s, that feels stuck? What advice would you give them?
I would say, make a list of the things that you find yourself not saying yes to, but you really want to do. And then maybe start going through that list, and you can put them, like, smallest to biggest. And so you're building up to it. If you're not a person who feels like they could just jump right in, if you're kind of want to go in, to the shallow end, that's fine. Then put, like, sometimes I just want to read that book, or sometimes I want to watch bad TV, like I like bad TV. So sometimes I want to watch really bad TV and I don't want to feel guilty. So start making a list and then slowly work your way through that list. You don't have to start all the way at the bottom of it. Just slowly start making your way through it. And you're going to find, I think they'll find that the more they work through that list, the more confident they will feel about saying yes to themselves. So when they get to the big thing that is really hard to do, they're going to be like, okay, I'm ready to say yes to this. And, maybe one or two of them will be ready to jump right in all the way. And I would just say to them, just do it. Like, literally, just do it. And what's the worst that's going to happen? You know, so that's the worst that's going to
Yeah.
happen. You're going to get lost.
Yeah. So if there's a few doubting Thomases out there, because there is, they find it really difficult. That's why, we talk to to so many people like yourself. What myths about starting over would you challenge? What would you say? No, that's a myth. You can or can't do that.
I think one of the biggest myths are that people who think you need to have hundreds of thousands of dollars in the bank and you have to have it all figured out. You don't need to. Like, yes, you need money to do things if you want to travel, but reading a book is free. Go to the library and take it out, right? Like, I think that, so you don't need tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars to learn how to say yes to yourself. I think that that's just really one of them. And I think that one of the other things that a lot of naysayers like to do is, you know, I don't have time. Like, right, I don't have time. I don't have time for that. And I think it's really easy for us to say we don't have time because we have to take care of the kids. We've got to clean the house. We've got to do the laundry and walk the dog, all those things. I think it's really easy to say we don't have time. But I also believe, which I know again is a cliche, that if you really want something, you'll do it. And I know that doesn't really address the whole travel issue, because there are a lot of people who won't be able to do that. Like, they just won't be able to kind of change or find themselves through traveling. But I do think that there's other ways to do it. It could mean going to eat dinner by yourself. It could mean buying a ticket to a sporting event or a play, or the zoo, even, for, or going somewhere that's free. It doesn't even have to be, go for a hike by yourself, drive somewhere, do something by yourself. I think that there are ways to make it work even without having money, and even without having to travel to get there to do
Yeah.
that.
Okay, so the purpose of getting lost. Let's try and get this book, out there to people. Why was writing this memoir important to you?
I really just wanted to tell the stories. And I still do. There's some really great stories, and the part about it that's actually the saddest part to me is that I still have lots of great stories and they didn't make it in, right? Like, I chased a rabies shot through Chicago trying to find one, like, right? Like, it's a great story. It's not in the book. But, there's these other stories of, I almost died in quicksand in the Amazon, or I got I was in a mosh pit in Doha, and I mean, outside of the message of what I kind of learned about myself, it's still really a funny story that I was in a mosh pit in Doha and I just like kind of braved the mosh pit. It was really scary. So was the quicksand in the Amazon. But at the same time, if you can't laugh about like the quicksand for certain, I mean, if I couldn't laugh about being stuck in quicksand in the Amazon with my dirty laundry, then I don't know what I can laugh at because it's kind of funny.
So, what was the hardest chapter then to write?
What was the what? I'm sorry.
What was the hardest chapter to write?
I think the ones where I really tried to understand the relationship, the changing relationship between like me and my kids. There's a couple of chapters because the way the book is structured is um the first 30 chapters are the trips, and that the trips I go on and the lessons I learned. And I'd like to just let folks know, like, as they're reading this, this isn't a book where, you read a novel and you say, okay, you have the main character and she does X, Y, and Z. Like when we think about Eat, Pray, Love, right? She goes on this trip, she finds herself in Italy, she comes back and life is glorious. Because that's not my life, and that's not how the book is written. The book is a series of stories that I'm trying to figure out who I am. And at different points, I might regress back into the scared old Tracy, and I'm still trying to figure out what it means to belong. So, kind of prefacing all that. But the end of the book, the last 6 chapters, are really about coming back after the trips and what it meant, both
Yeah.
what it meant work wise, what it meant with my family, what it meant with my kids. And those were kind of those periods of being like, maybe I am part of the problem. And do I want to do something about it? Or what I don't think I still have resolution on that. Like I still think I'm
Yeah.
trying to figure that out. But those were really hard to write because they were afterwards, and you're just sitting there with your thoughts about, are you the problem? And
Well,
that's
this is what I was going to ask you. Did writing the book help you? You know, especially when you review it and reflect on it. You know, did it help you understand your journey differently?
Yeah, I think that the more distance I actually get from having written the book, the more I find about myself, and the more I'm becoming more and more brave, for sure. Like quitting my job at the end of this year to go to Africa, right? Like, to me, I never would have been able to do that a year ago. I never would have made that decision. So I think the more distance that I have between when I wrote the book and where I am now is allowing me to kind of take more and more control over the person who I want to be, over the person, not even who I want to be, the person who I believe that I am. And I think that that's what the book has done for me, especially in these last 6 months or so, last 6 or 7 months.
So that which is excellent. So, what do you hope readers will take away from the book?
I really hope that the one thing they take away is, because even like some of the ideas we talked about today, this distilling the difference between fitting in and belonging. I'm not sure even in the book that I fully kind of tackle that issue, and talking about it today, I'm like, man, like, yeah, like, I think about it. I'm like, man, yeah, like really there is such a huge difference. I hope the readers take away from reading, when I hope they read it, I just want them to sit with some of the ideas kind of the way that I'm doing, right? Like sit and think about them. Don't just go into reading this book and be like, I'm going to read it cover to cover and be like, "Oh wow, this was a really fun, exciting book. I'm done." Like sit, read a few chapters and think about it and try to apply it to your own life and be like, how might this look for me? Or what might I be able to look? What kind of risk have I taken? What kind of adventures have I gone on? And what do they mean for my life in general? What do they mean for who I am becoming? And I think that's what I would want readers to take away from it. Don't just sit and read it cover to cover. It's not a book meant to be read like that. And I think you'll be kind of disappointed if you do.
Excellent. Well, look, where normally I go on, well, will do. I'll go on to a quick fire question before I close, but there's a couple of things I wanted to first say, and we'll put the links in the descriptions on the podcast and on the socials. Where can listeners find the book?
So the book is widely distributed. So all of the main venues, things like Barnes and Nobles and Amazon, and even if you go to websites like I found it on Target. You can also go to my website, which is Tracy Smith Author, and that will tell you more about the book. It tells you more about my journeys, where I'm going, what I'm doing, how I've been, and there's a link to the book there as well that'll take you to Amazon. So I probably would just suggest go to my website. You'll find out even more about the
Yeah.
book, and then it links directly from there.
So what's next for Tracy Smith then?
Oh, I am I'm going to Africa. I have a one I this time I legitimately have a one-way ticket to Nigeria, and I'm going to spend the next year on a writing project in Africa. I've decided that the career that I've spent building over the last 20 years is not the career that should define me. And writing the book has really allowed me to realize that um, I prefer words more than numbers, because right now I work in numbers and I do prefer words. And so I'm going to 15 countries in Africa, all over the continent, and I'm going to look for what belonging looks like. I want to see what it looks like in other people. I found what it looks like for me, and now I'm really interested not in what people say it is, but I'm interested in how we notice what belonging looks like in all different places and spaces.
Brilliant. Well, look, let's get on to the quick fire round. It's
All
just
right.
a quick one word or one sentence. So I'll just get straight into it. What's the most beautiful place you visited?
Vietnam.
Most surprising destination?
Vietnam. I
That
would say
sounds good.
probably
We'll all
Vietnam.
look up there now. But what's the biggest lesson from solo travel?
That I can do it.
Something you wish your younger self knew.
How to access traveling. I wish the internet had existed the way it
Way
does
back there.
today,
Yeah.
30 years ago.
But what's the biggest fear you've overcome?
Um, God, this sounds so silly, but sending that text message and asking these two people who I really didn't have a great relationship with if they wanted to hang out.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So, one thing you're still working on.
Asking people if they want to hang out, inviting myself along to when colleagues at work are talking about happy hour. I don't invite myself. And so I'm still working on how do I do that here? I can do that overseas. How do I do that here?
I think that's because you've kind of got no choice overseas. You'd either sit in your, but you can always go home to your safe place when you're at work. Do you think?
Yeah, I
So you
think
can
it's
tuck your.
the people here, they know me, and then you worry about being judged or what they'll think about you, or maybe if they really want you or not, and then you have to see them again. Overseas, that anonymity, you
Doesn't matter.
can,
Yeah.
yeah, it doesn't matter.
So what does belonging mean to you today?
But um belonging means belonging to myself. like acknowledging that I am Tracy and I belong to myself first and foremost, and anything else will come after that. Like it's this internal thing inside me. And I think we have to accept that that's where the real belonging, that's where the real work is.
Excellent. Okay, so the final one for me is, if someone listening today feels lost, uncertain, or trapped in their life and that no longer feels like it's theirs, what would you like them to remember?
Oh, I think I would I would think I'd like them to remember that they deserve to take up space. And by acknowledging that they deserve to take up space, it means that they deserve to say yes to themselves. And so read that chapter of the book. I know I keep going back to that, but maybe it's not read the chapter of the book. Maybe it's walking around the block. Maybe it's visiting a new museum or somewhere you've never been. Maybe it's sending a text message to somebody that you haven't talked to in a long time. But I think the remembering that they deserve to take up space is what I want them to remember, because I think that feeds all of the actions. You have to believe that you deserve that.
Excellent answer. So, Tracy, thank you so much for joining us. Tracy's memoir, The Purpose of Getting Lost, is a powerful reminder that it is never too late to choose yourself, embrace uncertainty, and begin again. We really recommend that you follow the links and support buying that book. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, please subscribe, leave a review, share it with somebody that you think that resonate with them as it did with me. And thanks very much again, Tracy, for coming on.
Thank you so much, Mark, for having me.
Brilliant.
Thanks so much for listening to Not Finished Yet. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you hit subscribe so you never miss a conversation. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share it with them. Please see the links to all our socials. Until next time, remember, you're not finished yet.